past, I've always just used a box brownie mix, which happens to be accidentally vegan, and used tofu to replace the eggs. But I wondered if I could make a from scratch brownie that was better than that. So I did a little research and I found that Love and Lemons has the most popular brownie recipe on the internet with almost 7,000 5-star reviews. So I am going to try to veganize that recipe today, and I'm going to also make my box brownie mix and see which one tastes better. So for the box brownie mix, you gotta love a good brownie mix. You just add the mix to a bowl, then you add the ingredients the recipe calls for. This one calls for water and also some oil. So for the eggs, I use a 1/4 cup of silken tofu blended up. This is the extra firm silken tofu. There's less water in it and it works better as an egg replacer. And I am going to use a 1/2 cup because I use a 1/4 cup per egg and the recipe calls for 2 eggs. I just put the silken tofu into my little cup blender and blended it until it was smooth. It works great in recipes like this. We will add the tofu to the mix just like we would eggs. Get all that tofu out. Now this is really blended smooth. You do not want chunks of tofu in your brownies. That is not a good look. So let's give it a quick stir. My sister and I would always get in trouble because we would come home after school and try to bake something because my mom was still at work. And we would make all different kinds of things, but brownies was a favorite because it made less mess, and we always got in trouble if we didn't clean up the mess. All right, it's all stirred up, and I'm going to bake the brownies in a 8-inch square pan that I've sprayed with cooking spray, and just pour them right in. Now that I'm older and have kids of my own, I totally get why my mom didn't want to come home to a messy kitchen. It's hard for those single moms who work all day to come home to a house and they have to take care of all the cleaning and the cooking and there's no eggs in it, so you can lick the spoon. So good. All right, I'm going to pop these in the oven. The recipe says to bake for 34 to 37 minutes. So I'm going to do that. But I just remembered that my husband loves nuts, so I'm going to sprinkle some walnuts on top. That sounds really good, doesn't it? So I'm going to go ahead and add walnuts to the top. This way they'll kind of toast while they're baking. And add a little extra protein, omega-3 fatty acids. Oh. There you go. Let's pop these in the oven for 34 to 37 minutes. I am making a half batch of these Love and Lemon brownies to see if they're as good as my box brownies, but I don't need 2 whole pans of brownies sitting around my house. So let's get started with the wet ingredients. We are going to use oil. I'll put a link to the Love and Lemon recipe down in the description box below. I'm not going to give you all the ingredient amounts because it's her recipe, not mine. So there's oil, and then we're going to add the eggs. Now, I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of blended tofu to replace the egg. Let me show you the kind of tofu I'm using. It is this extra firm silken tofu. This is great tofu because you can keep it on the shelf in the pantry and you always have it on hand. I'm going to go ahead and add my salt here so it mixes in. Just a smidge. I'm going to stir that together. When you blend up that tofu, you want to make sure it's super smooth because you don't want any chunks in your brownies. Okay. So that's all of our wet ingredients. We're going to go ahead and add the dry ingredients. When I do anything with cocoa powder, I like to use a sieve like this because the cocoa powder gets clumpy. You don't want a clump of dry cocoa powder in your brownies. So I'm going to go ahead and put everything into this. It's going to be some granulated sugar. Now, in the notes on her recipe, she said she was successful at reducing the amount of sugar in her recipe, so I went ahead and reduced the sugar a little bit so I could feel a little healthier. And then we also add in some all-purpose flour. I'd like to try that with some whole wheat flour sometime, and some powdered sugar, which is an interesting ingredient in brownies. I've never seen that before. And then here's the cocoa powder that's a little bit chunky. I'm going to add that in. That just makes sure all the lumps are gone. If you don't have one of these, you can use one of a little sieve, or just do a lot of mixing to get that, get the chunks. The only thing else I need in here is some chocolate chips. So if you can't find chocolate chips in your local store, I'm using the Nestle plant-based chocolate chips, but you can also use the Enjoy Life, or there's other chocolate chips you can use. If you can't find chocolate chips in your store, you can sometimes find the dark chocolate in a bar like this and just chop it up. That will make a nice addition to your brownies. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to chop a little bit of this up and use a little bit of these semi-sweet and make a good brownie that way. I only need, the whole recipe calls for half a cup, so I only need a quarter cup for my half batch. So here's my quarter cup of chips. It's actually a third cup because a little extra chocolate won't hurt, right? And it's ready to go. Let's stir it up. Oh, I'm going to add some walnuts too. I forgot. I toasted these a little smidge in the oven, so they should be good to go. Usually when I make a dessert, I like to toast the nuts because it gives a lot more nutty flavor. So this should be a really good batch of brownies. Okay, let's put this in a pan. Oops. I'm going to grab my spatula. I don't need this to go to waste. Here we go. Okay, this looks really good. It looks like a real brownie recipe. All right. Okay, I just need to put this in the oven for about 40 minutes and we will have some brownies to try. So our brownies are out of the oven. They look great. Again, remember that this is the Love and Lemon's most popular brownie recipe on the internet that I've veganized, and this is the Duncan Hines boxed mix. So we're going to want to give these a try, but we have to let them cool. Something you know when you're cooking with tofu in baked goods like brownies is you need to cook it longer than the recipe calls for. This recipe called to cook it for about 34 to 37 minutes. I cooked it for about 42 minutes. And this one here called to be cooked for 40 minutes, and I probably cooked it for about 45 minutes. So just check it and make sure that it's not completely soft in the middle when you take it out of the oven, but it will firm up as it sits. So let it sit here now, and we'll let it cool. I'm so excited, it's time to try our brownies. Now remember, this is the boxed Duncan Hines mix that I added some walnuts to. I'm going to take one of those out. Look at that. It's perfect. And this one is the Love and Lemon's famous brownie recipe from online. We get a corner piece of both of them because corner pieces are my favorite. Here's a little tip. If you make these if you make these in muffin tins, then you have all edge all around, and they're really good that way. This is a good brownie. I like the fact that I made these myself and I could adjust the sugar in them so they're not overly sweet. I think I could probably replace some of that white flour with whole wheat flour to make them a little healthier. And let's see what these, the Duncan Hines. It's really hard to tell the difference between the two. They're both very, very similar. This one on the edge was a little drier. I think I may have cooked it just a little bit too long. But it's a nice chewy brownie. The walnuts inside. So, you know what? In a pinch, the Duncan Hines mix is great if you need something fast for a bake sale or a potluck or something like that. But if you have a few minutes, it didn't take that long to make your own brownie mix, and you can choose the ingredients you put in them. So I'm going to link that brownie recipe in the description box below, and I'm also going to type out how the changes I made, and I'll put that down in the description box below too.